Welcome to The Owner's Exit, the podcast where business owners learn to plan smarter, exit stronger, and move forward with confidence. In each episode, you'll hear from industry experts, seasoned entrepreneurs, and owners who've successfully navigated their exit. Together, we'll unpack the real stories and proven strategies beyond smooth, successful transitions, and share practical advice for your own exit planning journey. So if you're a founder, entrepreneur, or business owner thinking about what's next, you're in the right place. This is the Owner's Exit Podcast, where we help owners see to, through, and beyond the sale of their business. We're so excited to have you. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Patrick, for joining us. Patrick Crouse, give you a little bit of an intro so people know who you are. Commercial real estate advisor with Southern Oak Real Estate, based here in Middle Tennessee. You live in College Grove with your wife, and your probably greatest accomplishment, your 4 children.
That's right.
Grew up in eastern North Carolina on an agricultural farm, and developed a passion for real estate there. You and your father, you learned a lot from your dad in the commercial real estate space, having witness him develop the farmland and expand that. And so you went to Asbury University, got a business degree there, and began your career actually in Birmingham, Alabama, within the steel business.
That's right.
A little bit of a turn from real estate, but and then in 2014 you moved here to Nashville. Got back into real estate a little bit through construction in the crane business, and but always felt called to come back to real estate. And through COVID, you decided to do it full time, and you've had a lot of success with over 88 million,
That's right.
88 million in transactions, participating in those real estate transactions within the last 5 years. So that's really good. Yeah, congrats on that.
Thanks.
So real excited to have you. Because I feel like a lot of business owners, when they see the building as an asset, really maybe they'd rather pay rent to themselves. That's kind of the big thing. And so a lot of them, there's a lot of missed opportunities with that. And so real excited to have you, and thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah.
Excited to be here.
Yeah,
So
it's great.
Yeah. Steve talked a little bit about your transition from growing up to Birmingham, steel, crane. So give us, a story of the background of, growing up and then COVID making the shift full-time into commercial real estate.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll expound on that a little bit. So grew up in eastern North Carolina. My grandfather farmed over 18,000 acres. It was all ag. We grew corn, wheat, soybeans, and potatoes. So I could drive a tractor before I could drive a car. But as I got older, I think I was in middle school, early high school, the state actually put a bypass right through the middle of my granddad's farm. And my dad talked the state into putting an interchange there. And then he bought about 1,000 acres from my grandfather to start, commercial development as the city was kind of growing or outgrowing the downtown and moving out that direction. And so, I got to watch, just that transformation, and it was really exciting. And he had some retail and some office buildings, and I was able to, I'll use the word property managed loosely. I helped with some of the mild maintenance tasks and, keeping the grounds mowed and that sort of thing. So it was just, it was something that I got to watch and be hands-on and really enjoyed. So fast forward, to Steve's point, graduated from Asbury University with a business degree. I actually had internships with some commercial real estate firms at that time, but I graduated in 2009, and that was a pretty bad time in the real estate market. So I decided I would go make some money and kind of took a little bit different route out of school. Worked for that steel service center down in Birmingham and as an analyst, and then they moved me to Richmond, Virginia, actually, and I opened up a distribution facility for them, and eventually moved into a sales role, which was kind of the desire at that time. Wanted to be client facing and really enjoyed that. Learned a ton. And then, in 2014, moved here to Nashville and was starting at that time, to Steve's point, I always had just a passion for real estate and a desire to be in that world. But moved here, got a job with a crane company as a sales rep, and turns out Nashville was a good spot to sell crane service. So
especially back then.
It was the state bird. So it was great. I loved it, enjoyed it, but started getting involved in more deals at that time here locally, and then kind of across the Southeast from an investment standpoint. And then, yes, in 2019, the crane company I was working for actually sold to a larger company, and I had already been kind of having some conversations with some brokerages. And January of 2020, I quit that job and jumped into commercial real estate full time.
Which was also a great time to start your own
you're seeing a trend here. 2009, graduate. 2020, decide to
do your own thing,
get rid of a nice salary. So
May of 2020, what was your mindset after making that shift?
It was there was a few dark days there.
Yeah, it's to say so.
Yeah, it was. I would say from I guess March is when we did our shelter in place for 5 days. And my wife and I had 2 kids under the age of 2 at the time, so we decided rather than be stuck in our house, we would actually go back to Eastern North Carolina where my parents were. They were on a farm. We could at least be outside and away from people. So we went for 5 days, and that turned into 6 or 7 weeks. At that time it was a really sweet time from family time and being for my parents to get that time with their grandchildren. But, for me as the provider, it was, there was certainly some doubt of, hey, what have I done? But thankfully, as you guys know, here in Tennessee, I mean, we opened up pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And at the time, the firm that I was working for, they are a healthcare specific buyer tenant rep firm. And so the healthcare space really took, I would say the end of May was when things really kind of took off. And truthfully, the second half of 2020 was actually a pretty good year, which I was very thankful for. Yeah.
So your career started to pick off or pick up some steam. Since then, have you developed like an expertise in a certain areas? What is your portfolio kind of concentrated? What's your focus?
Yeah, great question. So the obviously, starting out in 2020 with Carr Healthcare Realty, they were a healthcare buyer tenant rep firm. So my main focus at that time was really healthcare specific. Worked a lot with dentists, orthodontists, veterinarians, optometrists. You're small, I would say you're 7,000 square feet and under healthcare users. So 1 to 2 doc practices. And that's what I did mainly for 3 years. And so just kind of entrenched myself in the local market here, Middle Tennessee. And, really to that point of COVID and offices needing to expand, they were wanting to be able to socially distance. So they were looking to widen hallways, open up their waiting areas and that sort of thing. So that was, a great spot to be. I was glad I was not in the office sector at that time. And so, as that progressed and to bring up the crane sales aspect and just my network in the market, there was a lot of business or a lot of networks that I was in that were outside of the healthcare space. And so fast forward to 2023, actually left Carr, and one of my colleagues, he and I started Southern Oak. And so as of right now, we still do probably 60 to 70% of our transactions are still in the healthcare space. But we also work with retail developers and do site selection for them. Do a little bit in the car wash space, helping clients find either sites for car wash or even divesting assets and that sort of thing. And then a little bit in the manufacturing and industrial space as well. So
it makes sense here in Nashville. The healthcare industry is so prolific to offer a lot of services in that area. It makes a lot of sense, especially with your background.
For sure.
Right? So when you think about a business owner and their opportunity as they're building the business, if they're brick and mortar, or they need office space, either to buy a location or just to lease and just outsource that. When they go to exit, what opportunities do they have if they do buy their building? What opportunities are presented when they go to exit their business?
Yeah, there's a couple different things there. So the number one thing that I like about a owner that owns a real estate or business owner that owns a real estate, it gives them flexibility. So there are scenarios where we've seen in the past where, a business owner is leasing a building and they may not have had representation on the front end, or they didn't think they were going to sell their business. And so there's sometimes a lease or a tough landlord can cause some problems in a business transaction, whether they don't want you to assign that lease, whether you can't sublease the space. So those are some rare scenarios, but that's certainly is something that we've run into in the past. But going back to the ownership aspect of it and the flexibility there, you have. It can add value to the business. If the buyer wants to own real estate, you can take that off the table if the buyer can't afford both the real estate and the business. And truthfully, there's scenarios where the seller, if they have, what are their goals? Do they want the long-term passive income of owning the real estate and leasing to the new business owner? Or do they want to pull some cash out? I mean, if we're involved early enough, we can review that and kind of help them understand what's best for them. I mean, there's lots of implications for that. So,
the last 3 business owners that we've worked with have owned their building in addition to the operations. And so as we're doing the exit planning modeling for them, the scenarios of continuing to hold on to the business, let the new owner rent out that space, is really just at that point, you're a real estate investor.
That's right.
And that's mailbox money that you can get, into retirement, which helps with Social Security, helps from distributions, from the net sale. And so, to your point, there's so many opportunities. You could also sell the property, right, to the new owner.
That's right.
And take that cash and invest it elsewhere. So,
that's
lots of opportunities.
What are some of the mistakes or common mistakes that you see when owners are looking at, given a couple of those scenarios, what could be a problem if they want to sell or they get an offer, and they have to consider what are they going to do with the building?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of mistakes that can be made, and that you see. I mean, I think the number one, to your point, let's say you've got an operator that owns a profitable business, and someone brings them an offer. There's an excitement level there, and I think sometimes they can rush into that decision without, I would say one of the biggest mistakes is just not having the proper team in place. Folks like yourself, folks like me, to set up. I mean, you want to have your real estate in an entity. There's a lot, especially older separate entity.
Yeah,
that's correct. A lot of the older generation, they just have kind of done. We own our real estate, and you see these listings like, oh, I'll throw the real estate in for an extra $250,000 or $400,000, whatever that may be. And so having a separate entity where you're paying rent, I mean, So
Patrick, in that circumstance, let's say, ABC Car Wash would be owned, the operations part would be owned in one sort of business entity, where it's an LLC, S Corp, however that, is managed. And then the actual building structure would be in a separate LLC, S Corp, however that. And so the operations would then pay rent to that second business, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's a lot of implications for that. I mean, number one, having a proper, proper entity structure in place, and then a fair market rent. I mean, that's a big. I mean, that can greatly impact the value of the real estate at a sale.
Yeah.
So
as an owner, we see a lot of times that rent is very flexible. It could be one-sided. It's favorable for the building business, and one that could be favorable for the operations. It just depends on the goals, and obviously there's some tax considerations. But one of the things that I had found, to your point, we ran across a case a couple of years ago where a buyer, we ran across the buyer. The buyer had bought a business for a fair price, but it came with the real estate. Well, what they did is they partitioned the real estate and sold part of the real estate, and it paid for the entire purchase of the business. And so that was a miss by the owner. And so I think it's real important, to your point, like you need to make sure that you're maximizing, or you're looking at all of the value, because a buyer might come in, and I don't want to say you're taking advantage of, but you missed out on some sale, on some proceeds of that sale. So
for sure.
Yeah, can you think of it? Have you ran across other opportunities like that?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, and one of the things I like to tell clients, and this is not a across the board, statement, but it's hard to get it, when you're selling a business and real estate, it's hard to maximize the value of both.
Right.
You know, you're either going to maximize the value in the business or maximize in the real estate, especially if you're trying to do it in that scenario.
Right.
I mean, obviously. So,
but you're looking for fair.
That's right. That's right.
Fair.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, I mean, there's a story, actually, someone that you know as well, that's here in Tennessee. They sold their business, and they did have an entity set up, and they were paying rent to themselves, but it was not a fair market rent. It was below market. Obviously, this PE firm came in and saw that and said, "Oh yeah, we'll sign a 10-year term. We'll sign a lease for 10 years," and that's a great deal for them. Their EBITDA is going to be high. Their margins are going to look good. But this particular now real estate investor or real estate owner who's receiving rent, let's say, wanted to sell that real estate. And this is a conversation that I had with this person. And, you know, because let's say that this particular market, that the market rents are $25 per square foot. She's receiving a lease that's $18 per square foot. So when we look at valuing that real estate, and we can get into this maybe a little bit later as well, but most of the time when selling real estate where there's a lease in place, you're looking at the income approach and a capitalization rate, which is market driven, and there's some, you know, several factors that lead to that. But, you know, in this scenario, by having that lower market rent, that person may have left, you know, $150,000 to $250,000 on the table on a sale down the road just because of not having the proper lease structure in place. So that's an example, a pretty drastic example from what you're talking about, though.
Yeah. Let's get into valuation now. I think that's a good segue. A business owner calls you and they say, "Hey, Patrick, I'm thinking about selling. I'd love to get a valuation on my property." What does that process look like for you? How do you go about even valuing a property?
Yeah. And so there's obviously different ways to value a property.
Sure.
I think the most common, certainly in the commercial real estate space, when there's leasehold in place, income in place, is the income approach. And that's where we're looking at the net operating income of a building. And we are putting a capitalization rate on that. And like I said, I mean, that is.
What do you mean by capitalization?
Yeah. So, great question.
Let's pull that. Unpack that
I'm trying to think of the best, you know, an easy way to describe that. You know, it's talked a lot about in our world.
Yeah.
You know, let's say you had, you owned a
like $1 million, a property that's worth $1 million.
That's right.
Commercial property.
So let's say it's worth $1 million, or we'll say, let's say you are receiving $100,000 per year in annual rent or net income, net operating income. And we say, you know,
that's
that property,
the lease, $100,000 a year.
That's
right?
correct.
Okay.
$100,000 per year. And you and we say there's a 10% capitalization rate. So you would take the net operating income, divide that by 10%, which would be 0.01. And that would be equivalent of $1 million valuation.
Okay.
And in that scenario, I mean, obviously we're using easy numbers, easy math.
Yeah.
That building would pay for, essentially the income would pay for itself over 10 years.
Yeah.
So.
And is that capitalization rate, is that dependent on location? Is it dependent on industry? What goes into that number? Because I've heard 10, I've heard 6. Like, how does that all come about?
Yeah, there are numerous factors. Some of the main ones, location plays a big factor in that, and it always does. Location. The other factors are the credit of the tenant. So let's say you have an A+ credit tenant, national tenant that's expanding, the cap rate's going to be lower. The lower the cap, the higher the valuation. And so, you know, when you see today,
because there's less risk. Correct?
That's correct. So then, you know, as the credit maybe is down, or it's your local mom and pop business, it's a more risky investment. They're not backed by, millions or billions of dollars of company value.
Yeah.
And so that's where you see some of the, an 8% cap rate and versus, an A+ credit might be in the low 6s. So there's a variance there that certainly plays an impact on the cap rate. And then interest rates also have an effect on that. It's let's just say for easy math again, interest rates are at 5.5%. and someone has a listing at a 5 cap, obviously it's upside down at that point. You can't put any debt on that building and have a return. So you want there to be a spread in interest rates and caps, and sometimes that fluctuates as our economy from an interest rate standpoint, environment, and cap rate, and it ebbs and flows, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So to dive a little bit deeper on this I think it's fascinating. For you, $100,000 of revenue just from net operating rent. How do you go about determining that cap for that business owner?
Yeah, great question. So you're looking at comparable properties as well, which that's another way to evaluate a property, but you're kind of bringing that into the equation in this scenario. You're looking at the location, you're looking at the business. The term of the lease also plays a big impact in that. If there's 15 years left on the lease, you can be more aggressive with your cap. If there's 3 years left, that cap rate's going to rise because it's more risky.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I don't know if that answers.
No, that is absolutely. Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
So, based on that evaluation and the cap rate, how do you help business owners decide whether it's good to sell or maybe they should hold? What's the process?
Yeah. So, and it's tough to answer that one way. I think that there's a lot of factors that play into that. Number one, what is that the seller's desire? What's the buyer's desire? Some of these private equity groups that come in that are buying up a lot of businesses, they may want the real estate, and there's some tax advantages from that, or they may not. They want to keep as much capital on hand as possible for growth. And so in that scenario, I'm going to work with the seller and figure out a strategy. Does he want to keep the real estate? Does he want to sell it? And we can help him set up the entity or the lease in a way that he can either do a sale lease back prior to a sale. So he can pull that real estate off the table, have a lease in place. Private equity comes in, buys the building. They've got a lease in place.
Oh, so you're saying sell the building before you sell the business, potentially.
Okay,
yeah.
And
because they might be two different buyers, considering whoever.
That's correct.
Whoever is the buyer for the business, you might have an idea if they are interested in the real estate. So you might go ahead and just pull the real estate off the table first. Yeah,
a good example of that, and I'll get to the rest of the question. Yeah. There's a group that my partner and I worked with in a year or two ago that they were buying up dental practices. They did not want to own real estate because they were in growth mode. And so we came alongside them, and basically when they were looking at a transaction, a lot of times those sellers were wanting to offload the real estate as well. And so we had a team of investors that we would evaluate the real estate side by side as they were looking at business valuation. We were looking at real estate valuation so that we could come in and simultaneously take the real estate off the table. And they knew, and we had a lease structure that they were comfortable with, and the investors were comfortable with. And so that was a way that we were able to work together, and help buyers. If the buyer didn't want to sell the real estate, no problem. But if the buyer if the seller wanted to sell the real estate, no problem. If they didn't want to, we just weren't involved in that scenario.
Sure. So, yeah, that was a win for the private equity group.
That's right.
Because they didn't want it anyways.
That's right.
You mentioned tax strategies. And I know real estate can have a lot of tax advantages. You're not a CPA. We're not CPAs, obviously. I feel like we need to have that disclaimer. But talk to us a little bit about a business owner who wants to include the real estate in a business exit. What tax opportunities are available to that business owner if they want to go that route?
Yeah, several. And to your point, I mean, we always want to get a CPA involved or tax advisor in that scenario. Yeah. But I mean, the big one and the most obvious, 1031 exchange. So we work with a lot of clients that, they're looking, hey, I'm selling this and we're going to have X that we want to go put into a new deal. That's certainly a really good way.
So 1031 is the tax code for that transition, correct? Where a business owner can take the proceeds from the sale of a property, invest it into another property, and basically defer all of their capital gains, so that they're not paid at that point in time. Correct. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. The only thing I would add to that is another like kind property.
Yeah. Good.
That's a big part of the code there.
Okay.
So
it can't be a building to a boat.
Correct.
Or a building to a personal or a personal home.
That's right.
That's
right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
There's some scenarios, but yes, that's a good rule of thumb.
Good. Okay.
So, and then, there certainly are other tax strategies on the back end as well. I mean, we can look at, different, you could sell the building in different tranches, if you will, to record that over time and mitigate some tax in year 1, 2, 3, or 4.
How would you sell it in tranches? To investors? Or
well,
how would that work?
More not to the same person, but just set up and it's
you're selling shares of the
not share. It would be more like a owner finance.
Okay.
And you're paying X amount for 5 years.
Yeah.
And that could mitigate the tax burden on the seller. And that's not a scenario we see very often, but I mean it's one that is effective.
Okay.
We see that quite a bit with businesses that are solely called installment sale, right? Where the proceeds are over maybe even 10 years, and business can be a lot of just regular income depending on how that's structured. And so spreading that out, although there are some risks involved with it, it can also be very beneficial from a tax standpoint. So
sure.
Totally tracking.
For sure. And then, even on the front end, and I know we've talked about this, we're kind of hammering this, but I mean, the proper setup of the entity and the structure makes a big difference as well. I mean, you mentioned LLCs and S Corps, C Corps. There's scenarios where there's some double taxation if you own your property in a C Corp and people don't know that. So that we certainly want to steer clear of that, obviously. But there's, like I said, there's a lot of different strategies. But the ones we see the most are 1031 exchanges, and then trying to figure out ways that they can either keep some ownership or equity in the real estate. That's another one. Sorry, I'm jumping back a little bit, but I mean,
good.
In essence, a partial sale of the real estate or and retaining some equity or ownership in the real estate is a way for them to mitigate that as well.
Yeah.
So
good.
And to participate with any future capital events as well.
Sure.
So we talked about some of the taxation. Well, let's go back to like valuation and increasing their overall value. How can the building or the real estate be used as a tool to increase the value of the business?
Good question. So, number one, obviously the location, we've talked about that matters. I mean, and then the appearance of the building. If someone I like to tell clients, the parking lot is the first thing people see. If someone's driving in, if there's a buyer coming to look at your business and the parking lot's cracked and faded and there's no stripes for parking, those are some little things that you can do. They don't cost you that much, but maintenance upkeep is something that's very easy. And I know we're talking about more like the structure and how to structure to add value. But
if you take care of the building,
that's right.
You're taking care of the business
That's
too.
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's a visual and appearance aspect that certainly plays into the fact. I mean, if it looks, it's just going to bring more value, and it's it's to your point. The perception is, hey, this person cares enough to make sure this looks nice. And some of that also depends, is this business client facing or is it not? I mean, if it's client facing, that certainly is a much bigger deal.
Right.
But as far as, the real estate adding value, like I said, I mean, there's so many different scenarios or different buyers that may be a big deal to them, or it may be, they may not have a desire to own the real estate. But as far as adding value to the business, I mean, it's pretty hard. It's hard for me to kind of pin down, one scenario. I would say I'd be much better suited to help you increase value of the real estate.
The real estate, yeah. That's fair.
Than how that kind of transitioned into the business. So
I'm going to throw you a little bit of a curveball here.
All right, let's go.
So we talked a lot about, how a business owner may or may not want to sell the property when they exit their business. A lot of times businesses are not owned by one person or one family. They're partners that are joined together in that. And so if partners own a business, so it's owned a third, or quarter, and maybe some partners want to sell completely, get out and do something different. Some may want to hold on and be a real estate investor. Have you worked with any partners in that situation, and what advice would you give to them as they have those kind of discussions?
haven't worked with that in that scenario much, where there was most of the time, I mean, they're trying to all get out at once, right?
Sure.
And that's certainly the cleanest way.
Yeah.
Once you kind of, there are scenarios where it does make sense to, but there's usually a buyout on the front end of, let's say if it's a third, the one partner wants to buy out the other 2/3, then there's, that would be a scenario where I would want to get a good real estate attorney involved and make sure everything's structured. And at that point, then it becomes, if it's families or if it's, long-term partners, the valuation of that is tough as well.
Yeah.
But I've certainly seen it done, but it can get messy at times.
Sure.
So as far as advice for that, I mean, I think the best advice I can give on that is to have a really good buttoned up, agreed upon operating agreement on the front end. And that goes back to kind of what we're talking about from a planning perspective. It's easy to get excited about real estate or these businesses and just kind of dive in. Hey, we're doing this. We're all, and if a business takes off and you're making a bunch of money and then somebody wants to buy them out, oh, we didn't really do an operating agreement. And then those values, I mean, we unfortunately, have seen that affect close relationships in a negative way.
And you're talking about operating agreement for the building.
That's correct.
In addition to the operating agreement for the business,
That's right.
you're saying separately
Exactly
for the
what I was
building.
thinking.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And yes, just like we're talking about separate entities
Yeah.
for the real estate and the business.
Got to have agreements in place.
You got to have agreements in
Yep.
place for both.
Good, bad, ugly. Here's our plan.
That's right.
That's what this is for.
Yeah.
That's great.
A couple of-
That's so good.
Yeah, a couple of things. One, we know that 50% of all business exits are involuntary, right? Death, divorce, disagreement between partners. And so having that operation agreement in place, not only on the business, but also on the property entity too, is a huge thing to think about and plan for.
Yeah.
The other thing is you were talking about how to deal with the partner scenario. I was thinking back to our conversation with Joe Maxwell. Joe's a VC fund investor here in town, works with a lot of owner operators. And he said, if you have two partners, one wants to exit, one doesn't, the one that doesn't just needs to figure out a way to buy the other one out, right? If they want to stay involved, like get creative and do it, and figure out where you can come to a common agreement. Not everybody has to stay on board. You don't have to sell the building, just because one person wanted to get out.
Right.
There's always a solution if you get creative enough.
That's right.
To transition once again, could you tell us about a story of a business owner you've worked with that has used this business as an exit strategy and has been successful with it?
Use his business or his real estate?
It's real estate, where you came
Yes.
in, you were able to
Yes.
pinpoint and have find some success.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of, and I might change this around a little bit. I think ultimately a profitable business, a business owner that has built a profitable business, I mean, that's desirable. I can think of scenarios where I don't know that the real estate helped in him selling that, besides someone just wanting to own real estate in business. But I do have a couple scenarios where in the sale of a business, we were able to assist in maximizing the value of real estate. So this was a healthcare provider in Alabama that he had, and he did not have separate entity,
Which is very, honestly, it's so common.
Yeah.
They buy a building or buy a piece of land just themselves.
That's right.
And then they develop it, and it just kind of gets bigger than what they thought it was originally.
That's right.
And it's not formal. And so this is very common that it's not structured separately. So
because he did not have a separate entity for his real estate, the business was not paying rent to this. He was not able to use the income approach to value his building. So, he went out and got an appraisal, and, I'm going to use some ballpark numbers here, but it was around $825,000 that his building was valued at, which to him was good. But we were able, through the, team with a CPA, we were able to look through his business, what his receivables were the previous years. And there's some different structures and some different, I'm going to call it math that we can look at, especially with the CPA, and they can say, hey, this is a threshold that you can pay yourself rent that is below market, but it's going to maximize the value of your real estate. So once we were able to get that in place and let him start paying himself rent over a period of time, we were able to come in and put a capitalization rate on the income, and we're able to get him a little over 1.4 million for his real estate from investors, which is, I mean, that's a huge increase.
So, okay. So I want to stop before you share another story because this is good.
Yeah.
If there's business owners out there who have given themselves favorable terms like that, if they're looking to sell, what's the time frame that they need to, hey, let's go ahead and separate the building. Let's put a lease agreement in place. Like how long to fully utilize or justifies a cap rate? How long does that process take?
That's different depending on but we like to see 12 months.
Okay.
I mean, the sooner the better,
right? Obviously.
And you would ideally set this up on the front end when you're, building the practice out or building the business out or, starting at construction, right?
Yeah.
But we'd like to see 12 months, and that tends to not get a lot of eyeballs on it as well, rather than someone who's just saying, "Oh, hey, I want to sell my building. I'm going to create a lease and then sell it immediately."
Yeah. That's a yellow flag.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. In some cases, maybe a red. But I would say 12 months is a good time frame. You've got some history there, and can establish a market cap at that point.
Yeah, no, that's good.
So, and going back to some of the tax strategies that we've talked about in this scenario, there's obviously almost a $600,000 increase there.
Yeah.
There would be some tax implications.
Good problem.
That's a good problem.
That's a great problem.
Yeah.
But this particular investor allowed this business owner to leave $500,000 in the real estate, and so he was able to pull out just over 900,000, leave 500 in the real estate, still have some ownership in his real estate, but he had, 900 grand to go either do a 1031 or diversify his portfolio. So,
yeah,
that's good. Can you, any other stories that like that, were you able to come in and provide value?
Yeah, I mean, obviously maybe I shouldn't have led with that one.
Yeah.
No,
that's good. That's so good.
I mean, there's, I can think of there's especially a few years ago. I mean, I don't want to dive too far into this because I'll get over my skis a little bit, but when bonus depreciation, when we had 100% bonus depreciation I'll use the car wash industry as an example. Yeah. I mean, there was a lot of scenarios where we could come in and we could really help groups buy multiple sites at once, and they could mitigate a lot of tax year one. And so those are some strategies that really make a lot of sense, especially for, certain buyers that need to write off a lot of income.
Yeah.
So
that first story you were telling about the business owner who went and started paying himself a fair rent, was able to get a lot higher cap rate. I can see from a business owner standpoint them saying, well, wait, if I start paying myself fair rent, my EBITDA number is only going to go down, which would decrease the value I sell my business. And I think what a lot of owners don't realize, just from conversations we've had, is that as a buyer looks at that, they can see that you're not paying fair rent, and they're either going to adjust the valuation based on that, or they're going to take advantage of a less than market value rent, like the case you were talking about earlier, which is then a bad real estate deal. And the point is, doing that is not going to hurt you when you go to exit your business as you might think it would.
Correct. And if you have, and I mentioned having the right team. Yeah. And if that's something that we evaluate in that scenario. Obviously, to your point, if he's not paying rent at all, and you start paying, $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 a month, that, your EBITDA looks a little different than it did. And so there's ways, but he's also getting an extra $600,000 on his real estate. Mm-hmm. Did it impact the value of his business that much? Mm-hmm. And so that's where you want to find, there's a sweet spot there, and you want to find, what does that look like? And where are we maximizing the value of the real estate and maximizing the value of our business as well?
Yeah.
So
some success stories there. Are there any stories that you've heard about or worked with that maybe didn't go so well from a real estate standpoint in a transaction?
Absolutely. I mean, and I've mentioned, one already. Mm-hmm. The unique part about what we've seen, my partner and I do most of our deals together. If there's not a good team in place, like for instance, you have, Mr. Smith that's selling a business to Mr. Tom over here. So if they're maybe they know each other, maybe they think, oh, hey, we don't need a broker involved. Hey, we don't need advice from this attorney. And I feel like most deals that we've either come in late where they didn't have the proper representation or a real estate broker or whatever. If they're unrepresented, a lot of times there's just a lot of moving parts to the real estate. There's a lot of factors involved. And so have seen deals fall apart from that quite a bit, just because they don't have a professional in place to help them through that transition. That's right.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. So, what advice would you give a business owner who's starting to think about their exit and also owns their building? I know we've talked about this, but to kind of sum it up, what would be kind of the couple key features that you would look for to get?
Yeah. I mean, number one, and I've probably mentioned this 2 or 3 times, I mean, finding the right team. Austin and yourself, you guys, a good real estate attorney, have some professional real estate representation, talk with your CPA. I mean, if you have the right team in place that are capable of working together, and then you can start to work on, that entity structure, the operating agreement, what is the appearance of the building? Do you have the proper property management team in place? There's so many different things that,
and ideally, like you said, a year before.
Yes. I mean, we tell clients 18 months before.
Yeah.
And it seems like that number keeps growing, 18 to 24 months.
Yeah.
But yeah, a year is good.
Yeah.
If you can start before then, that's great. I mean, the more time that you have to plan and prep, certainly the better off you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. So having a good team, making sure you have the proper entity structures in place.
Correct.
What I heard too, making sure that they're separate entities.
That's right.
And then also, planning ahead of time.
That's right.
Before the sale.
That's right.
Do the proper thing, do all of that 18, 24 months, ideally, but at least 12, get 12 months of those structures and systems in place before you're looking to sell.
That's right. And that goes back to what we talked about earlier. If you're already working on those structures and already planning, if someone does come to you out of the blue with a really good offer, you're not rushing.
What's fair.
You know what's fair.
Yeah.
You know that there's just so many different scenarios where, having that plan, and we talk about this in all aspects of life, but having a plan in place and working through that, you're in a position of strength as opposed to, not really knowing what's going on.
Yeah.
So
we all know the difference between being ready from a pop quiz in high school
that's right.
and not being prepared for a pop quiz in high school. And we talk all the time about how business planning or exit planning really is business planning. And that's something that you need to be focused on at all points in time, because you don't know when an offer is going to come.
That's right.
You don't know if, you're going to have something happen in the business that you need to exit the real estate. Right. And so doing that work on the front end is good. I have one more question, then Steve has one more. Where can people find you? If somebody wants to get in contact with you, Patrick, what's the best way to do that? Yeah.
So Southern Oak Real Estate, our website is southernoak-re.com. My email is patrick@southernoak-re.com. And my contact information is listed there, and I'd be happy to chat with anyone, and love meeting new people, and certainly love helping people maximize their value in the real estate. So
yeah, that's great. One last question. So what is your favorite flavor of ice cream?
Oh, I'm going to disappoint some people here.
Uh-oh.
My favorite flavor of ice cream is vanilla.
No
Just
way.
vanilla.
Just vanilla.
Any location, any brand, or you're just wherever you're going, you're just getting vanilla.
Pretty much. So if I'm, second question might have got me. If I'm buying ice cream from the grocery store, it's Haagen-Dazs vanilla.
Yes, very creamy.
Very creamy.
Yeah.
And my wife says that's the fewest ingredients in the ice cream too, so maybe it's healthy. I'm not sure.
Yeah. That's a way to justify it.
That's right.
Hey, I got the healthiest ice cream.
That's
baby.
right. And then if I go to like a Jenny's or something, I might get a little creative, but I'm not a big chocolate guy in my ice cream.
Okay.
So
that's good.
Yeah.
Okay. So vanilla.
Not
plain vanilla. It's just vanilla !
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
I love it.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me. This has been
We
great.
enjoyed the conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah.